Hello and welcome back to what I'd wished I'd known about self-publishing before I got started. I am Karlie with Dragon Key Press, and today I want to have a real talk with you about your marketing budget. You may remember me mentioning budget and such in the previous video about social media, and this is actually a relatively new concept, some of the things I mentioned, something I learned at the Knapp Writers Conference this past fall, and it was a real eye-opener for me because they were things that I hadn't really considered before. Now, when we usually think about budget, we think about how much money we have to spend and how much everything costs. But what we fail to actually take into consideration is there's more than just monetary cost. There's also the physical cost, wear and tear on yourself. Physically, there's the mental, emotional cost, and there's a time cost, because the mental, emotional, and the physical costs kind of go hand in hand. We're going to just kind of lump them all together into the mental, emotional. But when I went to this presentation, the presenter actually had on there this big spreadsheet that showed how much time she spends at different social media sites, promotion sites, and in-person type things, and how much it costs monetarily, how much time she actually puts on there, and kind of actually a little bit of how much she actually enjoyed doing it or not. So the whole idea is that while monetary budget is definitely an important thing to recognize, we also need to actually take into consideration the other aspects and how it's going to affect us physically, mentally, emotionally, and what kind of time we actually have to spend on these kinds of things. As I said in the social media video, you can't just go onto every single social media website, whatever platform, etc. out there and expect to be able to do it all. The same thing with your mental, emotional health. If you're trying to do everything, juggling all the balls in the air, your stress is going to go through the roof. And I have certainly had my fair share of this. But other things you need to take into consideration is you are not a bubble. Your book marketing is not a bubble. Nothing about your writing, editing, formatting, publishing, any of that occurs in a bubble. Real life affects everything. The time constraints, the money, the mental, emotional, whatever you have to spend is going to be influenced and affected by everything going on in your life. So take that into consideration. For example, a year or so ago, my mother passed away, and that was a mental, emotional, and even physical drain on my overall budget. And I had to subtract that from what I was capable of doing in regards to editing, writing, illustrating, and anything else that I was doing with my book stuff. The same thing kind of applies with normal, everyday, whatever stuff. If you are a parent, you have to subtract out of there any time that you have for your family, whether it's just your spouse, whether you have kids and spouse, or whatever the case may be. This also goes for roommate time, if you're in school, if you have a full-time job or even a part-time job. These are things you have to take into consideration. Because let's face it, a lot of us indie authors are not going to make a lot of money starting out. So we have to have something else to help keep the bills paid. Those are all going to take into account and affect your budget. So you need to actually think about those kinds of things. What kind of time can you actually put into this? What kind of resources, mentally, physically, emotionally, and monetarily, can you afford to put into this? If you remember going to school, especially college, if you went to college, they had all those schedules, and you had to make sure classes fit, and blah, 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 and you had to have time to get between the classes, and everything like that. It's kind of like that. You actually have to be able to schedule yourself to do them. The old saying, schedule time to write, blah, blah, blah. The same goes for editing, formatting, marketing. And there are people who say you will have to sometimes overbook yourself to get it all done. Well, this is not necessarily true, and that's going to just result in burnout and make you hate the whole process. So please don't overschedule yourself. You know you best. Your physical health, your mental, emotional health, what kind of budget you have to work with. And it doesn't matter if it's the same as somebody famous like Brandon Sanders or James Owen or any of those big name authors out there, or even the more well-known indie authors. They are not you. And their budget is not going to work for you the way it does for them. In fact, it may actually be a really bad idea to compare what you are capable of doing with what all of these other people are doing. Because they're not you. Their circumstances are completely and totally different. They have different home lives. They have different health and medical needs. They have different everything. So comparing yourself to somebody else and what you can and cannot do is a horrible idea. So take all of those other people that you compare yourself to, your favorite author, celebrity, blah, 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 mentor, whoever, and just kind of put them on the back burner. And then look and see what you can actually afford to do. If you are physically disabled, going in person may be a thing you can't do. So again, take that out of the equation of what's in your budget of things to do. And this is basically, look at it as a list of to-do things and how much time you can spend on them, how much energy you can put into them, and how much money you actually, will spend on doing them. For example, I actually create a lot of my own promotional materials, but that takes time. And while I'm doing that, I can't go out there and do in-person book signings or things like that. If my personal budget says you can barely pay the bills, I don't have money to go out to do all of these book conferences or other means of promoting myself in person because, hey, gas money is gas money and it costs money. So those are things you have to take into consideration. Or physical health says, yeah, nope. I mean, we've been through a lot of health things lately. Not going to mention which ones. I'm sure you know. There's a lot been going on. Mental health, etc. has gone just crazy sauce because of all of this crazy sauce that's been going on. So you have to evaluate what you are capable of doing, what you can handle, and don't think of your budget as static. It has to be evolving. Because we, as individuals, as human beings, are constantly evolving. The only constant in life, they say, is change, and that's true. So if you are using your budget as a static, then, you're not getting all the bills paid and you're not getting everything done. Sometimes you have to adjust and say, well, this week I can only spend so much time doing actual social media posts, or I can spend more time writing that blog, or I can spend a little more time editing. I have to spend less time on this. It's a matter of what is prioritized in that specific point. But if you have an idea of what you want to do, and you put it down in that list, and you kind of try to go off of a baseline of, here's how much time I hope to put into everything, here's how much money I have available to put into these different things. That gives you kind of an idea of where to start from. And then just kind of adjust it as you go, because life circumstances change. The past 2-3 years have certainly told us and shown us this. So don't get stuck in the mentality of thinking once it's set, it's set. Think of it as Jell-O. Solid but fluid. It's not going to turn into a hard brick of resin that's sat there, cast, and become hard as cement. That's not how your budget works. Even big-time companies will tell you that the budget has to occasionally shift based off of all kinds of different factors. So you should take that in consideration with your own budget, especially in regards to budgeting your time, not just for marketing, but for every other aspect of your life and every other aspect of your writing, publishing, so forth, etc. But in regards to marketing, you got to make it kind of a thing that's going to be more consistent and hopefully a lot more prominent in some regards, especially if you were to that point where you actually have things out there that you want to sell. Because as much as I like to think that my stuff sells itself, it usually doesn't. And if people don't know it's there, they're not going to look for it. And if people don't know that they need it, they're not going to look for it. So you have to actually put put yourself out there. And yes, being an introvert makes it really hard. Believe me, I know, because technically speaking, I am on that introverted scale, and I personally find it easier to talk to people when I don't actually have to look at them. Being in person is a huge anxiety thing for me. But if you feel comfortable enough to push yourself in that aspect, you can put that into your emotional budget possibility sheet. And I do suggest having a possibility sheet for your budget of things that you can potentially do, and then just kind of slide it up and down based off of the circumstances going on in your life. But again, these were things I didn't really think about. I'm sure that somewhere deep down in the back corners of my mind, I had an idea of all this, but until it was actually brought to my attention in a panel workshop at a conference, I didn't even really consciously think about this. So hopefully this will actually give you the opportunity to consciously think of this too, because you are not just spending time when you are marketing out there, you are also spending your mental, physical, emotional health and stability and your money. Even if you're like, oh, hey, I'm not actually spending money right now because I'm just at home recording on my computer. You paid money for that computer. So technically that kind of counts. And you're paying for web hosting or things like that. So those kinds of things you need to take into consideration and put down there. Write all the things that you actually spend money on and then put them into their different categories and then prioritize and how much time you can actually give each specific point. And don't overburden yourself. Start small. And then if you can handle it, gradually add more stuff in. But don't get to the point where you are all consumed by promoting. Promoting is a huge aspect. That marketing is essential to get you out there. But don't go to the point that you neglect everything else just for the sake of shoving your face out there among everybody else. And I say shoving your face out there because I've seen it so many times on social media where everybody's like, look at me, look at me, look at my book, look at my book, woo, you know, and it gets really loud and crazy sauce. You got to find the way that works best for you. I do a lot of word of mouth myself, and it kind of works, and there are people out there who actually do find me that I didn't think would find me. I have books sold internationally, which I still find is rather crazy sauce to me, but whatever. But yeah, just take that into consideration. Every aspect of the author journey, the promotion, the publishing, etc., needs to have a budget. And if you're trying to do multiple things at the same time, write, publish, and promote, make that all part of your budget. Not your, this is a house expense budget, but this is my indie author or even traditional author budget of what I can afford to do. My social media presence, my promotional materials, everything. You do that and you will do awesome. And just, like I said, adjust as necessary. Hopefully this actually gave you a little bit of new insight and ideas of things that could possibly be, put into that budget, things you may not have thought about before, like me. But my cat demands my attention. I don't know if you can hear her little jingle bell as she's trying to get me to pet her. So I hope you learned something new, something that will be helpful. Feel free to leave comments, etc. I know I haven't exactly been good about saying that in the last couple of videos, but hey, you are always welcome to try and contact me, and I will do my best to respond, etc. I'm Karlie with Dragon Key Press, and I hope to see you next time.